the last 6 chapters of Daniel are very different than the first 6 chapters of Daniel. The last 6 chapters of Daniel are a series of visions and dreams that Daniel experiences, and they talk about the rise and fall of empires in the Middle East. It speaks to the Babylonians, which we've talked about, the Medo-Persians, which we've talked about, and it talks about the Greeks and the Romans that comes later. There aren't stories there because that comes later, but some of the visions that have happened in Daniel and that happen in the last half of Daniel speak to those kingdoms. And some say that it points to the end days as well, as long as the coming of the Messiah. And I realize, 3 or 4 of us might be really excited about that. Yeah, let's hit the prophecies and really go at it. But the rest of us would kind of be going kind of disengaged, like, yeah, I don't know. I mean, how do you know that? How do you read that and say that's what that means? Because it's really kind of difficult to come to prophecy and come up to an absolute, concrete plan of what it says. Here's 2 reasons I chose not to get into the weeds of these final chapters of Daniel. 2 reasons to avoid it. Number 1 is we don't have all the information. I can tell you this is what it is, but there's still a part missing. So I could be totally wrong. Anybody who tells you they understand the last half of Daniel could be completely wrong. They might be right, but it's like we don't know, right? So why get that heavy into it? Daniel chapter 8, he's writing, I, Daniel, was overcome, lay sick for days. I got up and went about the king's business. I was greatly disturbed by the vision and could not understand it. He didn't even have all the information to share with us. Like, I had these visions. I don't even know what they meant. It just made me sick. I just couldn't figure it out. So we don't know. He didn't know. We don't know. In chapter 12, he says, I heard but did not understand. And so I asked him, my Lord, what will be the outcome of these things? What's the deal with all these visions? And he said, go on your way, Daniel, for the words are secret and sealed until the time of the end. Basically, Daniel, it's not for you to know. If it's not for Daniel to know, it's probably not for me to know either. He just didn't want us to know. We don't have all the information. So it would be futile for me to pretend that I have an answer to all the visions and all of the things that are going on in Daniel or in books like Revelation. Sometimes we do the same game with Revelation. And in Revelation, a lot of people will connect the two in some of the imagery. Even in Revelation, we don't have all the information. Anytime you see someone who says, I've got all the answers, and they've written a book, and they have something to sell, and you think, oh boy, they're really smart, and they sound exciting. They don't know. Revelation 10:4 says, when the 7, thunder spoke, John is writing this, I was about to write, but heard a voice from heaven saying, seal up what the 7 thunders said. Do not write it down. There's a whole portion that we don't even know. So why would we pretend that we do? There are times God has said to a specific person, here's what's going to happen. I'll let you know. Don't tell anybody else. Like John here. So it's fun to toy with it. I have definite opinions on it, but I also understand my different opinions. As passionate as I am with them, I could be wrong. I'll be like, oh, look at that, I was wrong. I mean, when I'm to heaven someday, and he's not going to say like, oh, you dummy, and you're not coming. So he'd be like, I'll be like, well, okay, I got that wrong. No big deal. But I have a hard time teaching authoritatively something that I can't say. This is really what God's saying here. Prophecy is kind of like the old fable of the blind men who want to know what an elephant looks like. If you've ever heard that these guys went up and they said, we're going to feel the elephant so we can kind of get an idea what an elephant looks like. It sounds incredible, but what's it like? So one guy feels the leg and he says, oh, an elephant's like a pillar. And another guy comes up and he feels the tail and he says, an elephant is like a rope. And one guy feels the trunk and says, no, an elephant is like a tree branch. It's an incredible animal. One feels the side of the elephant and says, an elephant's like a great wall. Well, none of them are wrong, but none of them are really right either. It's a bigger picture than that. They just have a tiny little piece. They're missing some information. So they have their idea of what an elephant is completely off, but partly right. I think that's what we do a lot with prophecy. It's a lot like that. We have some information. We don't have all the information. And so we try to piece it together and find a verse here and find a verse there and pull a verse here and come up with a plan. It may be right. Again, I don't think it's worth getting into it for the next 6 more weeks on this. Second reason, I think it's not worth getting into the weeds during this time anyway. It'd be a great study, like in a Sunday school type setting, but not in this setting, is that we have so many bad examples. There are plenty of bad examples out there. Mankind is historically really bad at understanding and interpreting prophecy. I mean, there are people who've had all kinds of very authoritative, this is the end, this is the time. You can go back, just do a Google search of people who, predicted the end of time, Jesus' return. And there's hundreds of them, and they just plain are wrong. What tends to happen, and with that, with being really, really bad at understanding it, we're really, really good at making it sound like we do understand it, which makes it even worse, right? But what tends to happen with prophecy is you hear a great sermon or read a great book or some seminar or something, whatever it is, and you get somebody's perspective, which may or may not be accurate. It may be based on completely bad doctrine, because some of it starts with bad doctrine and it gets crazy. But now you've heard that, now it's in your heart, now that was the first thing you heard, now you're an expert in it, and you will go to the wall and fight for that view, whether it's right or wrong. But you assume it's right because you heard it and the guy was really good at saying it, and that gets kind of crazy. All that happened was you had a guy who was really good at telling his point of view, and he could have been completely wrong, but he was really good and convinced you, and it gets people in all kinds of trouble there. As you read through the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the people Jesus encountered, he encountered some of the smartest people on the planet, the people who had studied the books of the Bible, the Old Testament at that time, the law, the Pentateuch, the prophets, right? They knew it word for word. They spent their entire lives, the scribes, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the teachers. I mean, they were dead. They were smart, right? They were super smart people who knew their Bible left and right, upside and down. They had spent their lives desperately looking for the Messiah. I mean, many of the feasts and the yearly things they did was all a sign looking for the Messiah. Everything, the whole world was looking for a Messiah. He finally comes, literally fulfilling hundreds and hundreds of prophecies. It wasn't like one obscure prophecy, born of a virgin. I mean, it was like hundreds of prophecies that he fulfilled. He's right in front of them, speaking directly to them multiple times, and they don't recognize him. I mean, if they couldn't figure it out, what makes me think I'm going to figure it out, right? The ones who actually recognized Jesus as a Messiah, as who he was, recognized him as an infant at the temple because they'd spent their lives humbly praying, fasting, seeking God, and God revealed to them, there he is. I mean, wow. That's pretty impressive. And plus, there's another group that recognized him as king, a group of pagans who came from the area of Babylon, who probably read the writings of Daniel some 600 years earlier, foretelling about a future coming king. And when they saw the sign in the stars, and they saw everything lined up how it was supposed to, they said, a king has been born. Maybe it's one of the big statue, one of these big visions that Daniel had. I don't know, but he's the king. We better go visit this king. We better make an alliance with him because he's going to be the winner. And they didn't necessarily understand what we understand about Jesus, but they understood he was the king from God. So here's what we're going to do these last few chapters. Rather than debate the different ideas and say what I think, what other people think, and you can come up with your own conclusion, whatever, you can read them on your own. You can find stuff if you want to. What I want to do, though, is do the more practical thing. Let's take a step back. See, how did Daniel know so much? All these first 6 chapters we've looked at, there were things he knew that other people didn't know. That there were times, that he could see things nobody else could see. Was he a special person, or did he do special things? Things that we can do. Is there something that we can learn from him that we could be just as insightful as he was? Well, maybe you noticed in that study of these first 6 chapters that Daniel was very consistent, very steady when it came to investing in his spiritual walk. I mean, that was everything to him. He was in a foreign land. All his physical world had blown up. Parents gone. Everything is gone. Everything is new. But he was very consistent from a young teenager up into his 80s, as we've read the whole range there. He was disciplined in prayer. practiced it every single day, often included fasting with prayer, which is spelled out pretty clearly in Daniel 10, which we're going to kind of camp out with today. I love the stories of Daniel, but it's probably Daniel 10 that has had the most impact on me just as a person. As far as the practices that I have put my life into, come right directly out of Daniel chapter 10. Telling you, how did he have so much insight? He has this vision about the rising and falling of empires. In chapter 10, we learned that he's disturbed about this vision. I mean, he's mourning, he's grieving, like this is something's not good. He's aching on the inside. And so he commits himself to praying and fasting, like, what do we do with this, God? He's just trying to seek out God's heart on this. In verse 1 of chapter 10, it says, in the 3rd year of King Cyrus of Persia, a message was revealed to Daniel, who was Belshazzar. The message was true, was about a great conflict. He understood the message and had understanding of the vision. So he understands this vision. He has vision, he understands it, realizes this rising and falling of empires. That doesn't happen without lots of pain and death, right? There's some bad things that are going to be coming to a lot of people. And he is tormented about this, and he commits himself to prayer about it. Verse 2, in those days I, Daniel, was mourning for 3 full weeks. I didn't eat any rich food, no meat or wine entered my mouth. I didn't put any oil on my body until the 3 weeks were over. You've heard me talk about it before, or maybe others as well. It's called a partial fast, what he engaged in here. He continued to eat. He ate every day. He didn't stop eating for 21 days, but he took specific things out of his diet so that instead of eating those things, he committed himself to prayer during this time. He eliminated rich food. That could be anything. So when I follow this pattern, I just determine what's rich food to me. What are the choice foods that some versions will say that I want to just eliminate out of my diet for a certain amount of time while I'm praying? He eliminated meat. So there's been times I have done a fast, that's a partial fast. Well, I will eliminate meat for 40 days or something. Or most usually, I'll eliminate a particular kind of meat. Just I won't eat fish, won't eat chicken, whatever it is. And I mix it up a little bit. He didn't drink wine. I don't drink wine anyway, so I will generally say, okay, I don't drink pop during those times. That's just what I do for me, because it's something I enjoy. I love a Diet Coke with a meal. And so okay, you know what? I'm just not going to do that when I do a partial fast. And the oil thing, that's for him was no bathing. I've never tried that one. I'm a married man, and that might not go well. I don't know. She might make me sleep outside. But it's not uncommon to fast activities of certain kind, though. So if you were going to do a partial fast, you could find some activity that you like to do. I don't know, I'm going to skip football or social media for people doing that, or anything, whatever it is, that you're not going to do for a certain amount of time. This is the most common fast that I do, is the partial fast. The reason I have evolved into this, I've done the other fast too, a full fast when you don't eat anything, just juice or water for a certain amount of days. But what's most impactful in my personal prayer life has been these partial fasts, because you can do it so much longer. You can do it for weeks. You can do it for months. I had a partial fast last 3 or 4 years one time. It was a significant fast that lasted for several years. But the prayer is so rich during that time because you're focused more on the things that you're praying about. When my daughters were in school, I did a partial fast for every semester that they did. And I would in the beginning, I would when I'd cut out beef or something, and no pop, and maybe sweets. Usually alcohol sweets would be the choice food because I've got a sweet tooth. I like it. And stuff like that. Before long, I realized if I fasted the same thing every time, I'd break during semester break, and so I'd be kind of normal, and then I'd go back in the semester and fast again. But when I did the same items every time, it became habit, so the prayer wasn't as intense for me. So I learned at some point I had to shake things up, solely because I have to engage my brain and think, oh wait, I'm not eating whatever right now. And then I remember that, and then I am encouraged and challenged to pray again. When the girls, they just kept going to school. When they finally stopped, I'm like, I'm not going to fast for a while. I'm going to take a break. And so I took a break here the last year or two, and a bit of a respite. And then this few months ago, Danielle lost a baby. And she had a twin that was, there were some struggles going on. There was some very serious situation there, critical situation with the child. And at one point I thought, well, what do? You pray. Well, I'd prayed, but it's like, I need to fast. So I engaged in a fast that will last until the baby is born, and it's a partial fast. And so I was thinking of what are things I like that will cause me multiple times a day, because even in a serious situation, you can go through a whole day and like, oh yeah, you thought about it once, and I prayed about it for 2 minutes, and it's like, if it's not continually in front of you, at least a dense guy, I won't pray as much as I want to. So I found things that I really, really, really like enjoy. So like the current fast I'm on until the baby is born is beef. Who doesn't like beef, right? Well, I do. I'm not eating sweets. And that came because, if you remember, whatever that week was, I've told you I had an issue with, Nestle Crunch bars. I was pounding them. I couldn't stop. That was the week I started the fast. I'm like, if I don't fast these, I'll just keep eating them. So I threw in sweets. Haven't had anything since. And pop. And I thought I need one more clincher in here. And so I chose potatoes, because potatoes are everywhere. Every meal you have, oh, baked potato, French fries. I mean, there's always potatoes around. So those are the four things in my current role that I'm fasting. And it was great. It's been great because one thing, it's actually healthy too. But also, that's not why I'm doing it. I'm doing it because, you want to go through the holiday season, and every time you turn around, here's a tray of cookies, here's a, whatever. I'm like, that's really great. No thanks, I'm passing, that's all right. Here's a hamburger. No thanks, hey, I'm grilling, come on over. There's all these opportunities to eat these things, and every single time I turned around, I'd be like, man, I'd that chocolate chip cookie fresh out of the oven with a cold glass of milk, man, that sounds good to me right now. But you know what sounds better? Well, you know what I want to do better? I want to hold that little baby in my arms. And so I'm like, you know what? No, thank you. And that's a trigger. And everybody's having a conversation. I'm just sitting there quietly praying, oh, Lord, bless that little baby. Help that little baby keep growing. And the issues that Danielle's having, may that, resolve. And they have the prayer. I pray 10 times more when there's something like this going on. Because otherwise, I'd be like, cookie, hey, can I have 3? That's just kind of my personality. This has focused my discipline. That's what I love about partial fasting. That's why it's been so powerful for me, because it challenges me. I just pray more. I want what I'm fasting and praying for more than what physical pleasure I'm going to get out of a steak or a sweet or a glass of Diet Coke or whatever. The idea of the partial fast for you, find your things. You don't have to do what I'm doing. Do your thing. Cheryl, my wife Cheryl, she loves to chew gum. So a lot of times when she does a partial fast, one of the things she cuts out is gum. I mean, because it's not like me, like, oh, gum, I can take it or leave it, no big deal. She's like, she's got a problem, right? She really loves gum, but she's like, okay, that's she'll give that up, and it's like that is a continual reminder. Oh yeah, I want a piece of gum. Nope, I'm praying for this or that. Find it is whatever that you go to, whatever you enjoy, and give that up for a certain amount of time. Come up with a time frame. Come up with a purpose. I suppose you do it just generically, but usually there's a purpose. I want. Praying for my girls and their academics, or I'm praying for a baby that's going to come, or there's been church things I fast and pray over for a certain thing until a certain thing happens, and then you head into prayer. That's what's going on with Daniel here. He gave up the choice food, he gave up the wine, he gave up bathing, and he was praying about this vision that he got. And as he's praying, he finds out exactly what's happening behind the scenes. I don't know if he knew this was going on. Maybe he knew this type of thing happened because he tended to know things. This wasn't like the first time he ever fasted, right? But he finds out what was going on behind the scenes. Well, like in my case, I'm just not eating beef. That's all I know. But there's something going on in the spiritual world that is so much bigger and beyond that. In Daniel 10, it says, on the 24th day of the first month, as I was standing on the bank of the great river, the Tigris, I looked up, and there was a man dressed in linen with a belt of gold from Uphaz around his waist. His body was like beryl, his face like the brilliance of lightning, his eyes like flaming torches, his arms and feet like the gleam of polished bronze, and the sound of his words like the multitude. Only I, Daniel, saw the vision. The men who were with me did not see it, but a great terror fell on them. They sensed something was going on. A great terror fell on them, and they ran and hid. I was left alone looking at this great vision. No strength was left in me. My face grew deathly pale. I was powerless. I heard the words he said, and when I heard them, I fell into a deep sleep with my face to the ground. Suddenly a hand touched me and set me shaking on my hands and knees. He said to me, Daniel, you're a man treasured by God. Understand the words that I'm saying to you. Stand up on your feet, for I have now been sent to you. After this, he said to me, I stood trembling. Don't be afraid, Daniel, he said to me. For from the first day, from the first day you proposed to understand, to humble yourself before God, your prayers were heard. The first day of Daniel's fast, and his humble approach to God, I heard what you had to pray about, right? But, verse 13, the prince of the kingdom of Persia opposed me for 21 days. Then Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me after I had been left there with the king of Persia. Now I've come to help you understand what will happen to your people in the last days, for the vision refers to those days. Now, this vision that this person that Daniel sees sounds a lot like the imagery of Jesus in Revelation. Maybe it's Jesus appearing to him. Maybe not. Maybe it's an angelic being. It doesn't really say. Nobody knows for sure. What's important to know is that this teaches us that there is intense spiritual warfare going on in the background while we're doing our thing, just praying. We can't see it. We don't know it. We don't know what's happening. Daniel didn't even know it. That's why he came in and said, hey, here's what's been going on. You've been fasting for 3 weeks, and this has been going on the whole time. And these battles, they affect our everyday lives. It affects the rise and falls of nations and politicians. That's what this vision was all about. It affects marriages. It affects families. It affects businesses and education. It affects our pop culture in a country. All the things that are used to influence our children are influenced by our prayers. Whether you understand it or not, whether we see it or not, there are battles taking place because of our prayers. The Apostle Paul mentions principalities and powers in Ephesians 6. It implies a hierarchy of angelic and demonic beings who are responsible for battle over specific geographical areas across the globe. I think it is powerful when we pause, even for 1 minute, and pray for the globe. That's why we keep doing it. Like, okay, we prayed for 8% of the planet so far. By next week, I assume it'll be 9. It's been kind of how that's been working. But when we pray and when we pause to pray for the nations, those spiritual beings that are battling over countries, there are things happening. I don't know it. I don't know what's going on. But God knows, and our prayers are effective, and they're powerful, and that's why we keep doing it. The vision Daniel had gave him a first-hand account of a battle that had been taking place concerning the national powers of his day. And he's told, when you started praying, the answer was given and dispatched to you. But for 3 weeks, I don't know what that looked like. For 3 weeks, I was detained. There was a battle. I was kept from coming to you. I was trying to come to you with the answer, and there was a demonic force stopping me. God had to dispatch another angel to come out and help in this battle, and now here I am. So whatever took place, we got through that, and now I am here. That all took place while Daniel was praying and fasting. So, I want to end with a couple quick principles that I think they really apply to the whole book of Daniel as we've seen it, but especially these last few chapters. What made him see things other people didn't see? I think here's some principles about this. Number one is Daniel knew spiritual things because his focus was on spiritual things. It sounds really simple, but truly it is true. All the stories of the past 7 chapters, of the times that he knew things nobody else knew, when he knew the dream, not only the interpretation, but the dream the king had. I mean, all the things that happened, all happened because his focus was on things like prayer and study, and he just happened to be living in the physical world, but his heart and soul was in the spirit world, right? He was engaged in prayer. if you were to do a completely unscientific, based on nothing but just conjecture of what Daniel's life looked like in a pie chart, his focus was like 95% spiritual life and 5% in the physical world. I mean, that's just how he lived. That's how he knew things other people didn't know, because most of us are like the opposite. We're like 95% in the physical world and 5% in the spiritual world. We dabble here in prayer and there, and we dabble in the spiritual thought, but we're not there. We're not living there like Daniel did. His fasting, his prayer, his focus, his thought, his heart, everything was about the spiritual world. And God's like, okay, we can communicate. I'm speaking and you're listening. I wonder how much God speaks to us and we don't even hear him because we're busy and we're focused on other things and we're worried about, oh no, but my toe hurts, or oh no, I got to get my car payment, whatever it is, And Daniel's like, whatever, I don't care. I'm just got my heart toward you, God. I'm going to open my windows toward Jerusalem. I'm going to pray 3 times a day. And I'm going to pray for repentance, and I'm going to pray for sorrow, and I'm going to pray that we get back. And he did that for decades. His heart was there. Again, obviously the numbers are made up. I just threw that out there. It's for illustrative purposes only. But most of us probably are not much beyond dabbling, and that includes me. As much as I like to think, boy, I'm a really spiritual guy, I'm not as much as I could be, or dare I say should be. Rather than letting God lead us, we're often led by our calendars and our schedules. We limit ourselves to what we can see or logically deduce, and we let God work around that, That's not what Daniel did in chapter 1. He was told to eat food that was a violation of God's law, and he's like, well, no, I can't do that. I'll starve to death. I'm just not going to do it. Like, what makes him do that? His engagement in the spiritual. That's not what happened in chapter 2 when the king asked for someone to tell him his dream and then interpret it. He's like, well, yeah, God's got that. And he was able to do it, to everyone's surprise. That's not what happened in chapter 3 when Daniel's friends were thrown in a fiery furnace. They'd rather die physically than deny God spiritually. And look at that. Jesus shows up, walking around the fire with them, and they come out, and everybody says, well, your God is real. He's like, yeah, we knew. I don't know, I'm not going to let a little fire stop us. A little thing like death, we're not going to worry about that. The whole book of Daniel is a case study of how to walk by faith and not sight. If you want to hear from God, if you want to know what's going on in the spiritual world, if you want to tune in to what's happening, you tune in spiritually. You live and walk in the Spirit. You engage in His Word daily. You engage in His prayer. I'm surprised at the things that Daniel could say in his 80s. Like that prayer was teaching from Solomon at the dedication of the temple. He was a young teenager when he was ripped out of Jerusalem. How did he know that decades later? Somehow, he studied. He kept it front of mind. He didn't like, oh, that was my teenage years. I don't remember that. It's a faded memory. It was fresh to him. He kept it alive in his world, in the Spirit. Number 2, Daniel's prayer was answered because he didn't give up. I think that's pretty important too. Daniel prayed, he mourned and fasted for 21 days. God answered on day 1. It took 21 days for that answer to reach Daniel because of the spiritual battle. Even Daniel, who knew so much spiritually, didn't know what was going on in the background, but thankfully also didn't get discouraged and give up. He didn't say, man, I've been praying, I've been fasting forever. Well, 3 weeks isn't that long, but he didn't just get discouraged and stop. The simple application here is don't give up. Don't give up praying. You don't know. You don't know what spiritual battles are happening in the background that are tied to the prayers that you're currently offering about whatever situation. You pray for a loved one who is outside of Christ. You just want them to know Jesus. I just want them to follow Jesus. And you're praying that. And I've been praying that for months or years, sometimes decades. You just keep praying and praying and praying. Don't stop. Obviously, someone's fighting hard to keep a hold of that person. The enemy doesn't want to see him come to Christ or her come to Christ. Keep praying. Don't ever stop. You pray for our nation to repent and to turn to God. And sometimes you look around like, man, it's everything but that. You just keep praying, never stop. There are battles happening in the spiritual world. We've seen a lot of it in the last few years. It's battles going on that are happening. Don't stop praying. Don't stop praying. Sometimes we get discouraged and blame God for not answering our prayers, but I wonder how many times God did answer them, but He just never got to us because somewhere along the line where they're battling through to get that answer, we gave up and said, it's not happening, never mind. Or God said no. Maybe He didn't. Maybe it's a bigger thing than you think. And you need to keep praying until you get a definite 100% no. I obviously can't answer if that's been your situation, but I can say don't give up. Don't stop praying. It takes fortitude. It takes discipline. It takes a full-on belief in what's happening in the spiritual world, affecting the physical world. That you have to believe that, right? It's not just, let's see if prayer works. Like, nothing else to do. No, that's first. That's first. And if we've learned anything from the book of Daniel, I hope it's been that there's so much going on in the spirit beyond what's going on in the physical, and for us to engage in that spiritual world. Let's pray.